Let's get started. So first of all, Tom was absolutely right, and let's make this, since it's an advantage we have here, the room is not filled, right? We've got fewer audience, which is great, so we can make this a more of a interactive experience. So if you have any question, you can rudely interrupt me, right? To say, hey, what was that about? And we turn this into something more like a discussion, all right? First of all, I just want to give some thanks, especially to CC, Tom, and the best. That was initially a random idea. First of all, we have a little group every Monday, after Monday session. So we walk over to a nearby restaurant. And this one particular Monday, I said, hey, I would love to give a talk here, maybe something to contribute. And I think it was CC who said, yeah, let's do it. So I got a date booked on 24th of August, and I'm very, very glad to be here, right? And second, a round of apology. So did you guys see the August poster online? So you have a whole bunch of monastics, proper teachers, right? And suddenly there's me. So I just want to apologize. It's almost like it's like a mountain, right? We're now at the dip. And next week, we can look forward to some proper quality restored, okay? So this week, just bear with me. Let's get through this. All right? Sounds good? All right. So,
Adam, is that why you shaved your head?
I've got something to say about this, by the way. It's related to tonight's theme. So just a little about myself, for those of you who don't know me, that means you never come to the party afterwards. Anyway, so my name is Adam, so I am a Buddhist. I started my Buddhist journey when I was 15 years old. For one particular year, I don't know why, and I thought I was going to die. I was perfectly healthy, enjoying my school life, sports and everything. I suddenly had a sense of things slipping away. So from that year, I took up the Pure Land practice. It's a school of Mahayana Buddhism. You repeat the name, the Buddha Amitabha. Has anyone heard of that before? Right? Thank you. So you keep on repeating, focusing your mind on the name of a certain Buddha, and the goal is to get into a realm called Pure Land. It's a very faith-based sect of Buddhism. And later, when I began college, university, I took one paper in the first year, and it was called something like Comparative Religion 101, something like that, right? One lecture, the theme was on Zen Buddhism. Specifically, Zen Buddhism, not any other kind. And I don't remember anything from the lecture anymore, except one koan. Koan is a Zen story. Supposedly, the function is to suddenly wake you up, and it changes the way you think. So that's a koan. And the koan was about this Japanese Zen monk. And there's a local village girl, and she gets pregnant. But out of shame, she says, well, I don't know the father. And then when she is pressed, forced by her parents to confess, what did you do? How come you're pregnant? And she made a lie. She said, now the father is actually the local Zen monk, the abbot. So they're very angry. The whole village went up there, especially after the baby's delivered, and said, hey, look, this is your son. You seduced an innocent village girl. Right? So he lost his reputation entirely. But the monk was like, is that so? That's all he said. Is that so? Then he took over the baby and he started raising the baby as a young monk, really taking good care of the baby. Many years later, so this young lady, she finally couldn't bear her shame anymore, right? I just framed someone, I just blamed someone else for something he didn't do. So she finally confessed. So it was actually the local butcher who was the father, not the monk. So the whole village would go up to the mountain, meet the Zen monk again, and say, we are so sorry. Now can we have the boy back? Because we need a son, right, in the family. So thank you for looking after, raising the boy. Now we want the boy back. And the Zen monk simply said, sure, here you go. That's your boy. And he said nothing else. He just said, is that so? So at the moment I heard that story in a lecture, and I was like, I gotta get some of that Zen in me. This is what I want to be. They're so nonchalant, so in perfect equanimity. Is that the right word? Right? Nothing bothers me. I'm so just cool as a cucumber. So immediately I sought out some local Zen groups in the city where I was studying. It was a Soto Zen school. There are two groups of Zen, you can say, right, that survive to this day. One's called Rinzai, the other one's called Soto. So I started sitting with this group for a number of years. By coincidence, that Zen group did not have their own venue. So they were renting the venue of a Tibetan center. And this Tibetan center belonged to the tradition called a Kadampa, like Gelugpa. It's very analytical, a lot of theory. And out of curiosity, I approached the nun there and says, "Oh, give me some teaching, right? I'll do whatever you say." And she was very kind, very obliging, and she gave me this system called the Lojiang, training of the mind. And that was my introduction to the theoretical side of Buddhism. Dharma, how do you do the analysis on anatta, non-self, right? Systematically. Because in the Pure Land tradition, it's all faith. You rely on the Buddha. And in Zen tradition, you really don't get a lot of instruction, not a lot. And it was in Tibetan Buddhism that gave me, let's say, a more academic foundation of what Buddhism is on the theory side. But in terms of Theravada Buddhism, unfortunately, my experience is very limited. I stayed 1 week with one of Ajahn Chah's. Is anyone familiar with that? Ajahn Chah's forest tradition, right? That's all I know about the Theravada tradition. So today, when I talk about Buddhism, when I use the word Buddhism, it usually refers to Mahayana Buddhism, because that's my background, right? So if you're trained in Theravada or your knowledge of Buddhism mainly come from Theravada, and you think something I say might sound strange, it could be a Mahayana idea, or could be I'm just making things up. Okay, so excuse me. So that's it. Okay, so, and initially I wanted to do the talk on, say, the interaction between Zen Buddhism and Taoism. And when I got into it, when I started digging up, let's say, quotations, right, references, and so on, I realized it's way beyond my pay grade. I can't do it. There's so much. So instead, I just want to offer a very general introduction to Taoism and how, as a Buddhist, Taoism could help you as well, has helped me to be maybe a better practitioner, right, ideally speaking. So, like I said, I'm neither a scholar nor a monastic, so I'm very unqualified. So if you don't find this talk very helpful, at least I hope that you find it entertaining on a bare sort of informational level, like you're watching Animal Kingdom or something, Discovery Channel, right? Or something like that. So now, like it or not, a lot of amazing things came out of China and its long and glorious history, right? Compass, gunpowder, paper, Nike shoes, iPhone. No, maybe not. So one of them that is particularly captivated me was actually a school of philosophy called Taoism. And Taoism is said to be the only native religion of China, because Buddhism originally came from India. It was sort of imported, right? Even though it really took root in China, and China started to give Buddhism its own flavor, color, contour, but it's still an imported tradition. And something that's way closer to the Chinese psyche would actually be a Taoism, right? That's now Taoism. The word Tao means. Does anyone know what Tao means? Yes, the way. The way, yeah. It's like Mandalorian, for those who get a reference, right? This is the way. It is the way. And Taoism, when we talk about Taoism, though, we get, there are actually two varieties of the Taoism. In the West, usually, Taoism is just Taoism. You think about Taoism, think about the imageries of a Tai Chi, perhaps, right? And some internal martial arts, the yin and yang, and so on and so forth. But within Chinese culture, Taoism means two things and two very distinct things, right? The first we have is called Daojiao, and it translates literally to the religion of the way, right? Jiao means religion. So it is purely a religion. It is a very syncretic religion. That means it's made up. It's not made up. It's made of different parts from other traditions. It's not like, say, for example, Buddhism evolves maybe out of a previous tradition, right? It's a reaction to it. But Taoism is very artificial in its origin. It's intentionally tried to grab different parts of other religions and to form its own identity, right? That's what Taoism is. For example, you have a whole pantheon of gods and goddesses, and they actually belong to Chinese folk stories, like folk religion, the Chinese founding myths and legends, almost like the Greek gods, right? They sit on the altar, usually not in a cross-legged position, but more like a sitting on a chair type, right? Your feet beneath you. And on the other hand, Taoism also heavily relies on Buddhist theories, because originally they had no theory to explain certain things. For example, karma is one of them. They borrowed the entirety of the karma system from Buddhism into Taoism. It's understood the same way. There are also 6 realms of reincarnation. After you die, you could be born as, what are the 6 realms again? God, Ashura, and 6 realms, right? Human, animal, preta, hungry ghosts, right? And hell. 6 realms. So they borrowed the whole idea entire. It just sticks it into now this new faith. And beyond that, also has a very rich culture of magic, drawing magical amulets to ward off evil spirits, to cast spells. Some black spells, some white spells, some are beneficial and some are used to punish your enemies, for example. Actually, my partner there, her grandfather happens to be a lineage holder of 2 secretly transmitted healing spells, right? So that's the religion of Taoism. So within this, because it's syncretic religion, like I said, it's very hard for a person approaching this religion to go, what the hell is this? It's got elements from everywhere, right? But at the core of this religious Taoism is philosophy. It's called philosophical Taoism, Daojia. Literally, it translates to the school of the way. And that's what we're concerned with today, mainly. Cool? I feel, how to say, religious Taoism, first of all, is never really shared too much history with Buddhism. It existed at many points in history as a competitor in China to Buddhism. Right? It says, oh, we have a better theory, we guarantee better next life and so on. It almost exists as a competitor, an alternative religion. Right? Not everyone has to be a Buddhist, right? This is the native religion here, Taoism. But philosophical Taoism somehow is an entirely different matter. First of all, it is not a religion. It lacks a lot of characteristics that would define what is a religion. There's no worship, there's no central deity, and there are no, for example, religious codes, like moral precepts, don't kill, for example, there's such things. They exist in religious Taoism, but not in philosophical Taoism. And another thing about religious Taoism is it contains, just like Buddhism, a huge amount of scriptures. And these scriptures deal with everything in life. How to eat, how to sleep, how to marry, how to call a spirit, how to summon a god, how to transform. So think about, it's almost like a Harry Potter mixed with Doctor Strange. Or maybe supernatural for those who get it. Right? But in the Chinese context, that's the whole general vibe of religious Taoism. So by comparison, philosophical Taoism is very lean and mean. It's very compact. It only has 3 canonical books. Some people argue there are only 2. All these 3 books, they're very short. If you really try, you could finish the entire canon of Taoism, philosophical Taoism, in maybe just half a day, if you're a good reader. They're very succinct, 3 short books. And the first of these is called Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu in the West is usually marketed as the Tao Te Ching. Has anyone heard of that? Tao Te Ching? Yeah, thank you. So that's the first one. I won't be name dropping whole nine, but if I ask you to pay attention to this right now, because all Chinese words sounds very similar, right? So the first one we have Lao Tzu. And the second book is called Chuangzi. And the third book is called Liezi. Out of these 3 books, only the first 1.5 are considered absolutely essential. That is the Tao Te Ching, the entirety of it, 81 chapters of poetry, verses, very succinct, how to say, it's a type of wisdom literature. Like, right, how to, nothing is being explained. It comes like right in your face. It tells you a piece of truth in a verse format. And Chuangzi, by comparison, is the storybook. It tells nothing but stories. It's stories and stories. And these stories are really weird. Really weird. It reminds one, if you read it, you happen to read it, it really reminds one of the Zen koans. All right, I'm not arguing how much connection is there. That's really beyond my pay grade to make that argument, how much Zen is Taoism. But if you read the Chuangzi, and to a certain degree, Liezi, you'll realize that they really remind you of the Zen literature genre. Okay? All right. So the relationship between religious Taoism and philosophical Taoism is complex, but I like to use a metaphor. Think about diving, Olympic diving. You stand on the board, then you jump off into a river. Not a river, sorry, a swimming pool. And compare diving with regular swimming. So in order to be a good diver, you gotta be a decent swimmer, I suppose, right? You can't, it's not a one-off event, you jump off and you never surface again, you die. You gotta be a good swimmer to do diving. But you don't have to be a good diver to be a fantastic swimmer. They simply offer very, very different things. So this is to say, in the center of religious Taoism, there's philosophical Taoism. But you can be studying philosophical Taoism without affiliation with any religion, right? Not even with the religion of Tao. Okay. So another huge difference between religious Taoism and philosophical Taoism would be their ultimate aim. What is the ultimate aim in Buddhism, guys? Nirvana? Anyone's got any other ideas? It's Nirvana, right? End of suffering, which is Nirvana, right? It's the blowing out. So it's perfect, end of suffering. But for religious Taoism, they have this, I would say, obsession throughout history to be immortal. I don't want to reach some kind of special state where you leave behind your physical body. You enter into parinirvana, something like that. I don't want to do that. I want to actually remain in my mortal body. Right? But how? Through certain eating techniques, certain sleeping techniques, certain physical, like martial arts, like Tai Chi, that kind of thing. By regulating your diet in a certain way, you can somehow supposedly live forever. And that's one of the main goals of religious Taoism. I think nobody has ever achieved that. Science may beat it anywhere, because these days we're talking about special drugs or implants to lengthen your life. There's on YouTube, I remember, there's a Baan guy. He's a multi-millionaire, a billionaire. He spends all his fortune to make himself look youthful and to stay forever young, So this is one of the central concerns of religious Taoism. And if you do die, or you decide to die, to let go of this mortal coil, right? You can somehow become a god or a demigod. You maintain this fantastic body in a heavenly realm forever. That's very important, forever. There's a sense of eternity, there's a sense of finality there. That's the final stage, the ultimate aim of religious Taoism. Some sects of religious Taoism may have an idea that's more influenced by the Buddhist side of things, right? There is a thing called nirvana, which means merging with the Tao. You use a different language. But in philosophical Taoism, this is entirely impossible. I want to give a quote here. So from the third of the books, 列子, all right, it says, that which is born must come to an end, and to wish to live forever and have no more of ending is to be deluded. And that's one of the reasons philosophical Taoism has such a grand time with Buddhism in China. And they have there's some periods of a complication and conflict, but overall they merge really well. To the point, like nowadays, has anyone heard of the name Thomas Merton? Yeah? So Thomas Merton is actually a Catholic scholar who was really into, let's say, Eastern side of things. And he made this stunning statement. It says the true heir of philosophical Taoism is Zen Buddhism, right? So they completely inherited it. So we're already talking about impermanence, so I want to lead with that a little while. I think it offers a really nice contrast between Buddhist ideas and Taoist ideas on the same topic, and that is anicca, right? Impermanence. In Buddhism, impermanence is first, it serves two functions. It is two things. First thing is the truth to be recognized. The Four Noble is not a Four Noble part of Four Noble Truth. It's one of the three Dharma seals. It's a fact. You recognize it. Everything is constantly in a state of flux. And the second, more importantly, it is seen as a problem. It's called how do you call this in Pali? It's a vipari something dukkha. Is that vipari nama dukkha, right? It's the pain of suffering, dissatisfaction of change. It is fundamentally not just a fact, but it is an issue, and this issue needs to be solved. Why it is an issue? I guess it makes people dizzy, right? Now, you're walking, next moment a bus hits you. Everything's very uncertain. Talking about shaving my hair, and can you believe a few years ago I had a long and luscious hair. Now the blessing to naturally look like a monk. So part of anicca. And that's the Buddhist idea of things. So what happens after the bus runs you over, after you die? In Buddhism, what do we believe? Next life. Provided you failed your task, you haven't become Arahat or Buddha, now you're thrown back into this cosmic washing machine, right? It turns God realm, hell realm, animal realm, human realm. It keep on turning. There's no rest. You keep on going. And finally it stops and the dryer function turns on. We just keep on suffering, turning. In my Buddhist training, especially from Tibetan Buddhism, this point is drilled into you. It's so important that you spend years just at this stage of Buddhism. It's called Langren Chenpo in Tibetan. So it's called, in English, I think, is translated to graduated path. So before you do anything, as soon as you enter this tradition in Tibetan Buddhism, before you do anything, before you learn a single meditation technique, you sit there and do this thing called analytical meditation. And what do? A part of it is to convince you how horrible this cosmic washing machine is. We call samsara, right? How horrible it is. You gotta have first develop this healthy sense of fear. I really don't want to be here. I want to get out of here. Here, this is samsara, that is nirvana. And the Dhamma is a raft. It carries you over. That's the Buddhist attitude towards anicca. Well, we can talk about more esoteric things. So nirvana is samsara, but I don't want to get into that. But there is a sense of dichotomy. You're right here. You got to get there. To end samsara, enter nirvana. Whatever nirvana is, it's a hard thing to define, but there is a sense of separation, division, right? So in Tibetan Buddhism, I said, we sit there, we do this exercise, you read some guidelines. You can't just be running away with your thoughts and just think anything you want. You gotta first, for example, think, nothing is certain. If you're born, you must get sick, you must get old, you must die. But there's a way out of this mess. You gotta practice Dharma, the Dhamma. Okay? But let's have a look at Taoism. Right? From now on, by the way, when I say Taoism, I usually refer to philosophical Taoism. Okay? So, from the second of the book, does anyone remember the name of the second book I mentioned? Wow, you guys are so impressive. Zhuangzi. The Zhuangzi features two stories that addresses this topic of impermanence and death, right? So the idea of reincarnation had already existed in China in a different form, less certain. In Buddhism, it's an established system. The Buddha explains canonically, like there are 6 realms and you hear here and here. But in Taoism, the idea is more vague. You really could be, some people were arguing at that time, when you die, you may be born as something inanimate, like a rock or stone. Possibilities. There's a slight difference, but the general idea, it does exist. The story goes, a certain Taoist sage, his name is the Master Yue, he falls sick. He's close to his death. And his best friend and a fellow Taoist master, he goes up to him and he asks him in his deathbed, are you hating it? He goes, hating what? He goes, are you hating having to die? Does it bother you? Now your life is coming to an end. And he said, oh no, it's absolutely wonderful. The Tao will transform me, right? When I die, if my left arm is reborn as a rooster, that means I'll wake up every morning on time. And if he transforms my right arm into a crossbow, I can shoot birds and have free dinner every day. If he transforms my ass into a cartwheel and my spirit into a horse, that means I can travel everywhere without hiring a team. Logistic team. So this is just wonderful. I can't wait to die. Then immediately there's a second story. It says it's the story of Master Li. He's also close to death. He's lying there, goes, oh God, And his friend comes over, and this friend asks more a direct question. He goes, hey, what do you think you're gonna become next life after you die? I said, oh, that's not my role to question the great Tao, the principle of things. It is like, imagine there is a piece of metal and the blacksmith is beating the metal and he's making the metal into some gardening tool. But this metal just jumps up and starts cursing the blacksmith and goes, hey, no, I will be a sword. Only a sword. Otherwise, don't mold me into anything, right? And this is like me insisting that I want to be reborn as a man again. I don't care. Bring me anywhere. I'm one with the Tao, right? So that's the Taoist attitude towards impermanence and death. And more on that later. This is something is easier said than done, right? Imagine you go up to when you yourself are suffering, or someone you love, right, is experiencing suffering. You go up to them and go, hey, you're one with the Tao. You'll be okay. It doesn't work that way. It's morally questionable. But later, we'll touch on that topic a little bit. So first of all, what is this Tao? And what is the Tao? Yes?
Sorry, I'm a little bit confused because you said earlier that the ultimate aim is to remain immortal in your mortal body. So now you're telling stories of 2 masters who
Yes.
are relating how they're going to be transformed into the next life, into different forms.
Yeah, well, study Taoism, and it's not literally your body will live. It's not to be thought of as literally you and your body will live forever. It means that these 8 immortals have transcended time, which means, we always talk about being in the present. So they are in the eternal present. They were real people originally. One was a actor, one was a barber, and it shows one of them is walking on crutches because he's disabled, and it's to show that it doesn't matter how strong your body is, you can reach that level of wisdom. Another is a woman, to show it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. And the actor and the barber, it means you don't have to be some great person. Anyone can reach that level of wisdom.
Thank you. Like that's precisely it. But more importantly, I was actually before we get to the description of what is a Taoist sage, but I'm here referring to philosophical Taoism. So I made a distinction earlier. Religious Taoism, the goal is to maintain this body, to remain youthful, or to become an immortal in a spiritual form. But here is we're talking about philosophical Taoism. In philosophical Taoism, the ultimate aim, I think I want to touch on that a little bit later, is definitely not maintaining this youthful body and to be vigorous, to be healthy on this earthly realm forever, right? Definitely not, like these characters that were mentioned. So just let me carry on a little. So what is the nature of this Tao that they're trying to acquire that will somehow enable you to laugh at death? He's not concerned anymore, right? So in another chapter in Chuangzi, the master himself, Chuangzi, he was asked point blank that very question. So he says, this doubt of yours, if you get it, everything's hunky-dory, you realize the Tao is all good, where is it? Show me it. And Chuangzi just said, look, that ant. That's it. And he looks at the ant, he goes, the Tao is so lowly. Okay, you don't like that answer. He goes, it's over there. It's just the grass. Oh, it's still lower, still more lowly. And he said, all right, in that broken tile, the Tao is in the broken tile? And he says, all right, fine, there. It's in piss and shit. And Zhuangzi, the master, just walks away. And when I read that story, it somehow really reminds me of a Zen koan. I'm not sure if everybody has heard of that Zen koan. It's a Japanese one. It features a master called Yixiao. So Yixiao was one day walking, and it's a freezing night, and he finds himself inside a Zen temple. And the first thing he does, because it's freezing, he walks on onto the altar and grabs the wooden Buddha statue, and he grabs it and he makes a bonfire out of it, start burning Buddhas in the temple. So the head priest of that temple comes screaming, goes like, what are you doing here? You know what, you're burning the Buddha. And he says, no, I only see a piece of wood. By the way, while you're at it, can you just bring me more Buddhas to burn? Right? But next day, when the head priest of the monastery walks outside, he sees Master Yixiao outside already. This time, he's bowing to a regular piece of stone by the roadside, offering the incense and chanting sutras. So he's worshiping the stone as a Buddha. Right? So I don't know why these two Zen stories somehow, they remind me of each other. In Taoism, this Tao is described. I need some help here. How do we define Tao?
And Lao Tzu?
Oh no, according to your idea, how will we define the Tao?
Well, I can answer that in philosophical Taoism. It's harmony with nature.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, so nature is the word here, right? If nature pervades everywhere, just like in Mahayana Buddhism, we call it Buddha nature pervades everywhere, then there's no place where the Tao is not. Just like this Master Yixiao, he refused to see the distinction between what is holy and what is profane. I can burn the Buddha, but because I can only see the wood there, right? And this Chuangzi's answer, I see the Tao everywhere, even in piss and shit, because it's part of nature. And that is essentially what Tao is. So somehow, in my personal case at least, when I read this kind of Zen stories or Taoist stories, it always gives you a feeling of dramatic revelation. It's almost like you're a normal man, you're walking, suddenly you hear a piece of wisdom and you get switched on. Suddenly everything, you're enlightened. There's no more struggling. There's no more spiritual practice. Zen story, like for example, Master Huineng, the sixth patriarch. The story goes that he heard just one line from the scripture, the Diamond Sutra, and he suddenly becomes enlightened. Yes, please.
So first verse of the Tao Te Ching.
Perfect.
Maybe you need a mic.
You guys defined Taoism earlier, but in the first verse in the Tao Te Ching, it says that the Tao that could be named is not the eternal Tao. So
Yes.
So does that mean like you literally can't define it in words?
Yeah. It's funny that the first line, the opening chapter, first line of the Taoist scripture, Lao Tzu, many people know it, the famous, says the Tao that can be spoken is not the constant Tao. But then Lao Tzu goes on to describe the Tao in the next 80 chapters. Have you thought about that? I mean, I understand. That's why in the next 80 chapters of Lao Tzu, only metaphors are used, such as this. You literally cannot put your finger on it, right? If you talk about it, it's somehow, just like in Zen Buddhism, there's a koan. It says, when a Zen master asks you a question, the moment you open your mouth, you're already wrong. The traditional story is you go up to a Zen master, and then the Zen master asks you a question. It tells you, for example, what is the Tao? Or what is Buddha nature? You go like, boom, you get whacked. You give a good answer, you get whacked. You get a bad answer, you get whacked. So as soon as you open their mouth to speak about it, you're already wrong. You're conceptualizing what can be conceptualized, right? But still, I think even Lao Tzu himself, he's got to try to describe the Tao. Because this is literally what I'm getting here at. It gives you this kind of feeling that the Tao, or maybe in Buddhist terms, the Buddha nature, is something so abstract, it can't be defined. It's like you get it, you get it. You don't get it, you don't get it. Some people, they can just walk around and suddenly they have a satori, epiphany, a moment. Suddenly it seems that, I transcended. But this really doesn't work actually in Taoism. It's not what Taoism is trying to say. And especially in Buddhism as well. If in Zen, you can suddenly become a Buddha, then why do we see all the Zen temples and people are sitting there practicing sometimes 8 or 9 hours a day, right? So this brings me to the section of practice. Like, how do we actually get to know the Tao? All right?
I have a question.
Yes.
Isn't it kind of the analogy that I thought of is like learning how to ride a bike? Like no amount of explanation from another person or reading a book would get you to be able to ride a bike. You have to literally practice.
Yeah, like swimming as well, right?
Yeah, or anything like that. Like any type of experiential knowledge can only be gained through some type of experiential practice.
Right, so I'll be telling a story exactly about that. And it's from the book of Zhuangzi, all right? But just like in Buddhism, we have basically two parts of things. You have the foundational things, for example, the moral precepts. What are the 5 moral precepts in Buddhism? Anyone? No killing, no stealing. What else? Yep, and what else? Intoxicants and? Not to lie. Yeah? To lie, right? So these are the 5 precepts. And then you have the practice of sitting meditation. And Taoism somehow, it usually is categorized in the same way. So I'm going to go through the foundational stuff first to offer a bit of a contrast, okay, with the Buddha side of things. And then later we will talk about formal practice, if there's any, in Taoism. Lucky for all the Taoists, so the principal virtues, the moral precepts you have to follow, are usually only 3, not 5. And they're very vague, all right? So they're more convenient in a way to follow. The first one is simply, it says, be kind. And it is described in the Lao Tzu's own words as respond to kindness with kindness, and you respond to unkindness also with kindness, and that's it. And the second one, it's called a second treasure, is frugality. And frugality doesn't mean being careful with money, resources. Actually, it doesn't mean that. But it says to restrain your senses. It says the 5 colors, if you indulge in visual stimulation too much, and makes one person blind. If you have overly rich food all the time, and it makes the tongue numb for it to lose sensitivity. Therefore, it is very important to be frugal, not with just money, but with our senses. Ultimately, there's no moral dimension like in Buddhism. There's a karmic consequence. If you indulge too much, you're using up your good karma, we usually think. But in Taoism, it's something more holistic. It's more something to do with not wasting your vital energy. Because the energy goes out constantly trying to touch new things, feel new sensations, to listen to louder and louder music, for example, driving faster and faster cars, right? Or substances in some cases, alcohol. So it says, be frugal with our senses. And the third thing is a very funny one. It's called not to get ahead of the world. It sounds really awkward when it's translated to English, but essentially it means be humble, keep your head down. And more than that, in Chinese, has the meaning of not to put your own agenda or ambition at the cost of other people's welfare. Think about, has anyone seen the Odyssey, the movie that's in cinema, the Greek myth, right? Think about Agamemnon, right? He returns home and he's immediately murdered. It's said in the book that because he walks on purple carpet and the gods get jealous. That's the same idea in Taoism. It says the surest way to make your life end prematurely. You encounter some disaster and you shouldn't die, but somehow something strikes you, bad luck. It's because you're getting ahead of the whole world. You're being too self-centered, right? You're too out there. And therefore, in Taoism, the third one is especially stressed. So maybe, say, on a certain Friday night, you're struggling with keeping the Buddhist precepts, right? You go, oh, today I'm following the Taoist codes. Yeah, it doesn't mean means I can drink a little. I'm just joking here. All right. So when it comes to the main practice, formal practice, in Buddhism usually means sitting in meditation. Of course, it's not true. It forms one of the limbs in Buddhism, but especially in modern days in the West, sitting meditation has taken up a lot of importance in Buddhism. There's a system. If you're following the Satipatthana Sutta, then you're working on your breathing. You're trying to anchor your attention onto your breathing until you reach a certain level of concentration. If you're Tibetan Buddhist, you may be practicing visualization, so on and so forth. The point is, everything is very systematic. It's well laid out. It's almost like a war with a war plan, right? If you encounter this issue, you have an antidote that will counteract it. If you have full of hatred, then arouse generosity. So it's not generosity, loving kindness, right? There's stage 1, stage 2. But in Taoism, it really gives me, at least personally, a whole different idea, a whole different definition of what practice is supposed to mean. And coming back to your question, right? What is the Tao? How do we define it? And it's like learning a bicycle, riding a bicycle. There's a famous story also in Chuangzi. It's a story of a butcher. He cuts up oxen, right? Cows, beef. That's his job. It's usually in Taoism is hailed as the ideal Taoist sage. But he's not a monastic. He's not a monk. He's not a scholar. He is a butcher working with the dead animals, cutting up their meat for sale, to sell. So the story goes that one day the Duke of Wei, that's in the ancient kingdom in China, and he's walking and sees this butcher doing his work. It's said that his blade is dancing through the spaces between the bone and tendon so effortlessly. The meat is falling off spontaneously. There's such a joy, and he stops. He's marveling at his cutting skill. He says, wow, I've never seen a butcher this good. And he goes up to the butcher and says, surely this is not a skill of an ordinary person. And the butcher is very cocky. You know, he's a realized being. He puts down his knife and he goes, you're right. This is not ordinary skill. Actually, it's got nothing to do with the skill. I'm following the Tao. I said, what do you mean you're following the Tao? It's like this. Many years ago, when I first began learning the how to cut up an ox, butchering, and I saw an ox as the entire ox, the whole body of ox. Now I've got to divide it in a certain way. Everything is manual. Everything is artificial, very deliberate. But after a while, I started to realize there's a natural pattern to this very task. And when I followed it, then my action becomes harmonious with the Tao. It's effortless. I never force my knife to go where it doesn't want to go. And everything becomes so spontaneous, I can't explain it. right? It's almost like riding a bicycle. And only after the last piece of meat falls to the ground, I know my job is complete. Then I'm standing there in absolute joy. And the Duke hears the story, goes, wow, you're a truly enlightened master. From you, I've learned how to nurture life itself. That's the story of how a butcher attains the highest goal to be one with the Tao through butchering, not by being a monk or a scholar. And that's a similar story in Zhuangzi. Features the author of the third book I mentioned, Liezi, because they sort of cross-reference each other in the narrative. Liezi, before he became a master, when he was younger, he was a very diligent full-time student of the Tao. His teacher was called Huzi, so he lives with the teacher, makes offering to the teacher to keep the teacher alive among other students, and they have a lot of book scriptures to memorize, they practice, so on and so forth. One day, he runs into a particularly powerful shaman, a fortune teller. Everybody runs away from the fortune teller because he is very scary. He can just look at your face and he will tell you when you're gonna die. I guess nobody wants to run into a person like that, right? I don't want to know. So Liezi invites his fortune teller to the teacher and says, do it for my teacher. And he goes, well, your teacher is gonna die very soon. So he started crying. He goes, like, what's going on here? My beloved teacher is gonna die. So the teacher goes, no, it's okay. Just tell the fortune teller to come back and read my face one more time. And he does. And he gets an opposite answer. Oh, luckily your teacher met me, the shaman said. I think he's gonna live. And he said, wow, what's happening here? And then on the third day, the master tells Liz to invite the fortune teller to come back one last time to give him a reading. This time, the fortune teller, one look at the master's face, ran away, frightened. And Liz is confounded. He goes, Master, what did you do to this fortune teller? He says, I displayed my original face, the face of my spirit, when it's together with the Tao. Right? You, despite all the years of book learning, sitting with me, living with me, you never learn anything real. Shame on you. And Lizi, you know what he did afterwards? He gives up his study and he goes home. It is said he replaces his own wife to be the cook for the family, because in ancient China, like in a lot of cultures, kitchen is really a woman's place, not anymore. But back then, it was very unusual for a man to say, I'll take over, I will cook for the whole family now, I'll serve the family in that capacity. And he started to feed animals, his own kept animals, as though he's feeding people with uttermost respect. And he stopped thinking about the complex theories and what Tao is and what Tao isn't. He tried to feel it, almost like riding a bicycle. It is said after a few years, he returned to a state of primordial simplicity and basically merged with the Tao, right? So this is the idea of practice in Taoism. There is specific instruction, only one place in the system of philosophical Taoism, not in religious Taoism, that talks about sitting meditation. It is called sitting in oblivion, 坐忘, sitting and forgetting. Right? Is anyone interested to hear how formal meditation is done in Taoism? I did not prepare this part. So it's also presented in a story. When you talk about philosophical Taoism, you can't get away from stories, just stories, right? So this time, it's Confucius' own student. His name is Yan Hui. And he goes, I want to really practice the Tao. I say, okay, you go away and practice. And he came back to report to Confucius like what he did. And he goes, first day I was sitting, I forgot rituals and music, all the formal things. That's good, that's very good, you're improving, but not enough, go back and sit more. He goes back and sits more and comes back. And this time, I've forgotten everything about virtue, benevolence, loving kindness. I forgot all about it. It doesn't exist for me anymore. And there's no good, no bad. I said, whoa, you're really improving fast. I've got but this is not the ultimate state. Go back one more time. And third time he comes back and goes, this time I've forgotten even myself. I don't know what myself is, what the Tao is. I only know I'm just being. I've forgotten myself entirely. And the Confucius goes, you obviously have achieved the stage I haven't even achieved, right? But I assure you, this is the right way. This is right, right? So we compare it again with the Buddhism. It's very systematic, except perhaps Zen, right? Sometimes I remember my own Zen teacher when I was practicing in Colombia, and I had a lot of questions in my mind, theoretical questions sometimes. Sometimes actual problems I encounter in sitting meditation. I remember for a month or two, I was feeling very frightened. I was almost living at a monastery, practicing whole day. Sometimes this extreme fright will enter into me. I think everything is hopeless, and it's very weird, this psychosomatic symptom. Even for serious matters like that, every time I raise a question to my master, Sensei Harami, he would say, "Oh, Adam, you're doing too much. Please just sit." So what I'm trying to do here is just sit. So this is somehow a very similar idea of the Taoist, very similar to the Taoist idea of cultivation. There is no method to begin with. And the secret, it cannot be put into words, unfortunately. You can, and I like to think about a story actually featured in Siddhartha. Has anyone read a book called Siddhartha? Yes, a few? And it's written by Hermann Hesse, right? Siddhartha. And now Siddhartha was written by some guy who really had knowledge into a lot of the Eastern traditions. It's almost like a mishmash of different ideas. So Siddhartha is a book, for those who don't know you, is a fictionalized version of the Buddha story. It divides Buddha into two characters. You have Siddhartha, the young prince that's leaving home, wanting to be the Buddha, but there's already a Buddha. His name is Gautama the Buddha. And they encounter each other. So the historical Buddha is divided into two. And there's a part where Gautama, the Buddha, encounters young Siddhartha with his friend, Govinda. And he recognizes the potential right away, you see. He goes, "Would you like to follow me? Right? Practice with me. I'll show you the royal road leading to liberation." In this account, Siddhartha thinks over a whole night. His friend Govinda goes, "I will join the Buddha. I cannot get any luckier. I'm going to follow the enlightened one and become enlightened myself, an arahat." But Siddhartha rejects the Buddha. He goes, and the Buddha goes, "Why do you reject my teaching? You know my teaching is right." And he goes to the Buddha, "I know your teaching is right, and I've no doubt you've attained what you say you've attained. But the issue is, you're not telling me is, how you attained it. This way is only your way. You can never communicate your enlightenment to me." Right? Because in Buddhism, there's a preferred way to do things. Especially in Theravada Buddhism, correct me if I'm wrong, the best way to reach nirvana is to be a monk. There's an advantage, right? But in Mahayana Buddhism, less. It's not so emphasized, you have to be a monk. But it's almost like an advantage. There's a preferred way to walk the path. You practice the Eightfold Noble Path. There's a system. And that's one of the main draws of Buddhism. That's what sustained me all these years, the systematic approach. But sometimes it can really box you in. I feel like there's no sense of mystery because the entire system is being explained to you. You even know what's going to happen after you die. In Tibetan Buddhism especially, even there's a tradition, a book that specifically aims at explaining to you what's going to happen after you die in the first 49 days. Right? How do you walk through this intermediary state called a bardo? It tells you that. It's almost like there's no space for imagination anymore. But in Zen, just like in the story of Siddhartha, it really emphasizes finding your own way. And it doesn't say you have to sit there in a certain posture and practice a certain way of breathing. It can be that way. It can be, because it's just one of the many methods. But it does give all the mundane tasks that we do, little tasks we do, working in a bank like I once did, working as a teacher, or working as a butcher, right? Or doing a sport you truly love. And the key is how to turn that into a process of cultivation, how to turn that into meditation, or at least to gain a state of meditative stability from whatever you're doing. And a lot of it, I thank Taoism for a lot of it, right? That's what I get And oftentimes, as a conclusion, I think we're running close to the Q&A, right? So as a conclusion, I often remember the Buddha's own words from the Pali Sutta. It says, do not go by, I cannot exactly replicate the words, but paraphrasing a little, and correct me please. It says, don't go by tradition, don't go by the fame of the teacher or a smart argument, but you got to know for yourself what leads to welfare and happiness and what is blameless, right? Butchering animals, cutting up meat is probably not a skillful activity leading to nirvana in a Buddhist context. Right? Now, Taoism, of course, it does not have that restraint. It's pretty insist on everything you do can, if you do it correctly, provided that we follow the basic moral guidelines. Be kind, be frugal, right? Don't get ahead of other people. Don't put your own welfare at the cost of other people's. Then every activity can be turned into a path leading to that stage. And the final thing I wish to mention is that perhaps today I'm equaling the Tao with the Buddha's idea of Buddha nature of nirvana. I think I've said it a few times. I'm just saying it's sort of like a historic side note. Starting in the 6th century CE in China, all the way culminating about 15th century, for 900 years. When you read Chinese Buddhist commentaries written by Zen masters mostly, and you get first sentence saying something like acquiring the Tao, how to be one with the Tao, 得道, 修道, how to practice the Tao. And next sentence, suddenly you have something like nirvana, Buddha nature, to realize yourself. So I'm saying is, at least within the Chinese framework, Chinese Mahayana Buddhism, to attain the Tao is being almost equalized, as a synonymous with the Buddha's idea of nirvana and Buddha nature. I'm not here arguing whether that is right or wrong, right? Because I know that Buddhism also comes in different flavors. Yeah, within Tibetan Buddhism, actually, there's a very heated debate. Like, is there a ground of a universal force? There's a ground of existence, like a Parabrahman Hinduism almost, or like Lord Shiva in Shaivism, right? Or Tao in Taoism, or how similar are they? Are they the same thing? Or some Buddhists say, well, no, they're not the same thing. But other Buddhists say, well, maybe they are the same thing. That is not, I'm not qualified to answer that, but I'm just saying in the Chinese context, to attain the Tao is saying the same thing as attaining nirvana, right? Of course, it's not universally agreed. A lot of people still jump up and say, hey, these are two religions talking about two different things. You should not confuse the ultimate aim. But again, I'm just offering some half-baked food for thought. Hopefully, it's been interesting. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Some questions.
Yes, please. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, so actually I read about Taoism, and I think at the beginning it's compared with empty bowl, if translation is correct. Yeah, so, and as well, if I'm not mistaken, it says that Tao is something what pre-existed before like all the gods and other concepts. Yeah, so it's really lead to idea of shunyata or emptiness in Buddhism too. So not exactly like some nirvana ideas, but more like of shunyata ideas in my understanding in some ways. How correct is it?
Spasiba, Vladimir, right? Thank you. Thank you. This is the real deep question. How academic do you want me to be?
In understandable way.
Okay, so first idea, the original scriptures from Lao Tzu says the usefulness of a bowl or a box, a space, is in its emptiness. It does not exist. First, interestingly, when Buddhism was introduced to China, the way to translate shunyata was not kong, but wu, which is the Taoist idea of void. Later, I think it was Kumarajiva, they had to introduce a new word to say, hey, this is the Buddhist idea of shunyata, emptiness. This is the Taoist idea of emptiness. And the seventh patriarch, Shen Hui, was asked that question exactly. So is the Taoist idea of Wu the same, nothing? That means same with the Buddhist idea of Kong, which means emptiness, right? And this, actually, I'm not going to quote him. Let's put it this way. The second thing you quoted says, there's a chapter in Tao Te Ching that says, before God existed, there was the Tao. So basically, God is a product of the Tao, right, in that system. So I would like to think there is some distinction. For example, in Tao is seen as a potentiality. It is something that permeates the universe. And it's dangerous to overuse pop culture reference, but it's really like the Force in Star Wars. It goes through everybody. It is everywhere at once. And everything is at all the time with the Tao. And Tao is never a personal force. It does not have a deliberate will. So it's not a God of any sort. It flows. And when you try to find it, this gentleman here actually mentioned that when you try to find it, it says when you're behind it, you can't see it. When you're in front of it, turn back, you also can't see it. It's almost like everywhere, but you try to find it, it's never there. It's the principle of nature. But the Buddhist idea of shunyata, I think it relates to the idea of interdependence. So when one thing is, that thing is. I'll give you an example to explain this. Like you're listening to this person talk, right? Mm-hmm. So at this moment, what forms your experience? First, you need to see me. That means you need healthy eyes. And also there must be light bouncing information into your retina. And you must have a consciousness. You must be conscious of it. And then you must understand the language I'm speaking. The language is carried by the vibration of the air. In Salistamba Sutra, which is a Mahayana Sutra, it says, which one of these elements is the air carrying the sound or the light reflecting the image of me to your eyes? Which one of these is you? That's the Buddhist idea of shunyata, is relativity, right? So when all these conditions are somehow together, you have this idea of yourself, a sense of self. I have my body, right? I know the language. I have a cultural context where I am. Imagine you're born in an adult body, you're suddenly here. You'd be freaking out, So all these things, this is sort of my understanding of the Buddhist idea of emptiness. But in later Buddhism, when we get to Tibetan Tantra and all that, there is a assertion that this emptiness is not wholly absent. It's not just this relational phenomenon, it's called emptiness. There is something that is there. And they quote a Pali Sutta. They said, the Buddha in the Pali Sutta says, I think it's the Digha Nikaya, it says, there is this consciousness that is unconditioned, is luminous all around. For without this consciousness, there would be no liberation. So the Tibetans really took this idea and say, okay, this force, this indescribable force, this is the Buddhist idea of emptiness, shunyata. So it's called affirmative negation, something like that. You're negating everything, right? Nothing's an independently existing bowl. It cannot independently exist by itself. If you're not here, this bowl is not here because there's no conscious observer of this bowl. And this is sort of the Buddhist idea. It depends how far you want to take the idea, right? It's called a Shinton view in Tibetan Buddhism. It's basically equating shunyata with the Tao in that sense. They're very comparable. You cannot tell which is which. But in Theravada Buddhism or in some other more Buddhism that lean towards the more, I don't have a word for it, but they are not very keen to assert that there's a thing called Tao that flows everywhere. You cannot find it. You will absolutely not describe it. So from the perspective of that camp, then Tao, the idea of a Wu, the void in Taoism, it's got nothing to do with the Buddhist idea, right? So it's a nuanced answer is yes, totally, and no. Is that okay? Do we have any questions?
Thanks for your talk. It was really, really interesting. You were saying that the Taoists kind of borrowed a lot of their ideas from other traditions. Where then did they get the idea of Tao? How was that made a part of the system? Was that something that was influenced by other traditions, or was that something that kind of came very independently?
Wow, I love all the quality questions. So before, Lao Tzu is really one of the very first books that uses the word Tao. And the first person to try to define it, he says the Tao is like water. It does not resist. Remember the story of the butcher cutting the meat? He does not resist the meat. Lao Tzu is the first person that talks about the Tao. But before Lao Tzu, I think even in older books like I Ching, the word Tao already exists. Somehow, some scholars, they are arguing that there is an interaction between the Hindu culture, not Hindu religion, but the culture from the Indus Valley and China, because they both have this very similar idea of the ground of all existence. Like in Hinduism, it's called a Parabrahman, right? And even in Tibetan Buddhism, it's called Adi Buddha. It's the primordial Buddha. It does not have a body, it's a force. And in Taoism, you have the Tao. It does seem that there could have been some interaction. At the same time, it could be the question of who invented the wheel. I mean, every culture invented a wheel. You give a boy a stone, he's gonna throw it, right? Doesn't matter like which culture he's from. So it could be just that. So I'm not really sure. But in China, it's Lao Tzu was what, about 400, 500 BCE? So that time the Tao became a very concrete concept. Also, when I talk about Taoism being a syncretic religion, that's more like the religion of Tao, Dao Jiao. Yeah, so that it's built on philosophical Tao. It is its core, but later it tries to enrich itself, and it took in Confucian ideas, it took in Buddhist ideas. Like how, what's really funny? When you visit any Mahayana temple in China, even in Bangkok, or there's one near Chinatown, you will see at least one Taoist god, at least one. And if you go to any Taoist shrine in China, and even in Bangkok, by the way, you will see at least one Buddha or one Bodhisattva, like Guanyin, right, Avalokiteshvara. So that's why it took a lot of ideas from a lot of religions. But when it comes to that Tao specifically, the honest answer is I don't really know. Yeah, but my guess is that Jung calls that a collective unconscious, right? So every culture we grow similar set of myths that are so similar. It's almost like heartfelt feeling. They can sense it, And I like to believe that is the case. The way is that
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yep.
Adam, what do you think comes after death?
What?
What do you think comes after death?
Jesus. Oh my, oh forgive me, in the name of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Until the end of samsara. What do I personally think after death? It's gonna be really personal, but I feel like what I'm really concerned is the continuation of my identity. But I have been in a very weird, I think it's wrong to relate this experience because especially according to the Buddhist tradition, it's not wise to advertise some kind of spiritual achievement. But this is not, let me assure you, it might sound like one, but it's not. It's a very spontaneous experience I had that really turned me more towards a serious path. And this has something to do with what I think about after death. So during COVID time, I was trapped in Istanbul. And one day, that time I was very depressed. I was not meditating. I was cursing and being angry that I couldn't get any more cash, from my online job because company wasn't functioning. So one night I broke the curfew, and because a friend said his friend brought him a very expensive bottle of whiskey. I said, I'm gonna go get drunk. I'm gonna get smashed, and nothing matters, right? So I walked to his house. On his way to his house in Istanbul, and something hit me that was very weird. It felt almost like an out-of-body experience. but it wasn't. I was very clear-minded. I was myself, but at the same time, I wasn't. I felt like I am just this random body, and it's born because my parents, they decided to consummate their love, to know each other, okay? And there's their decision. Somehow I'm born with a body, and I'm born into a certain society, certain socioeconomic background. Then I read certain books and interacted with certain people, encounter certain problems. And all of these, they are somehow not me. They're just things happening spontaneously, almost like a machine. Like, it's not like my decision that I wanted to study a certain art or practice a certain discipline or move to a certain country. Things that somehow I had this spontaneous, it's not a realization, not intellectually, but I felt it wasn't me. So I think like my personal view is, first, I don't know what's really gonna happen after death. I really wish I could give a classy answer like Keanu Reeves, right? It's like, oh, people who love me will surely miss me. But I feel like there's not going to be a continuation of the same set of memories that I call myself. I think somehow that's going to be altered in a way that the person becomes depersonified, if that makes any sense. I've got a feeling that's what's coming. And at the same time, memories of a lifetime is perhaps stored somewhere. At least that's my hope. Perhaps stored somewhere. And that's just my feeling, my conjecture. I've literally no idea, but I've thought about it. I think it's about the concreteness of your identity, the sense of self being slowly breaking apart. And that's what causes terror, horror, when people are facing death. Perhaps it's very actually in line with what is said in the Buddhist scripture, right? The 5 elements of body slowly disintegrate, and then your consciousness somehow, it dissolves in a certain way. So that's my idea, yeah. What about yourself, by the way?
That's interesting, because you also said that your identity, which you are most concerned about preserving after death, is also a product of accident.
Yes.
The consummation, and then the socioeconomic background you're born into, the culture you're born into, the language you're born into, the psyche you're born into, that's all an accident, as you described it. But at the end, you want to preserve that identity that was created by these accidents.
Yeah, it's almost like the grandest trick I played in the cosmos in a way, right? Like none of this I can identify as myself per se, but that's what really reawakened my conviction in the Buddhist way of seeing the self. Right? There's something there, and I experienced it sort of spontaneously to a very minor degree, and very temporarily for a few seconds. I felt like that, but it is like, maybe this is what meant by Maya. We're trying to preserve, hold on to all these elements that are really not ours. I can't tell this body to grow longer or shorter. That's actually what I thought to myself. And then later I read the same thing in the books. If I could control my emotion, this emotion truly mine, then I can tell this is the way I want to feel in this instance, right? And it's not up to me. I see somebody triggering me, and I'm completely a different person, right? So, yeah, but still I'm trying so hard to hold on to grasp hold there, handful of sand. It's gotta be me, it's gotta be there. And I think that causes a lot of suffering. Like I said in the talk, Taoism has a slightly different understanding of this process. It wants you to be more one with it, but Buddhism has a system to counteract that. But yeah, that's essentially, I think I've strayed from the topic of death, what happens after death a little, but I really don't know. But I feel like there's a whole process is about things leaving their original places. Yeah, spontaneously, not up to you. Yes, sir. Well, that's the.
The way you describe death as like your identity being dissolved, that's actually not something I'm afraid of at all. Like I don't really care about this identity or this body or this memories. In fact, I don't really like any of it. But the thing that terrifies me about death is the inability to experience things. That's what terrifies me, right? Like, because like in existence, like before I was born, whatever that was like, I can imagine that's what it's going to be like after I'm dead or this body's gone. That's terrifying.
Yes.
Is that also part of my identity? Like this feeling of being able to experience whatever this is or this reality?
Yeah, I think that's it's the constituents of a sense of self. Without ability to experience everything else, there is no sense of self, right? It is like I do this mental experiment. It's say, imagine yourself without a body, without this body. And I imagine myself as a ghost sort of floating around. I still have hearing, I still have eyesight, and I can still smell things, but somehow people can't see me. In my childish imagination, if I were without this body, think about it, is that a pure definition of being conscious? Because how do we really see? How does a ghost see without physical eyes? That works like a camera, right? That captures the light coming into it. So when you said like death, the dissolution of the body, it doesn't really terrify you. The real terror is not being able to experience. But I would like to say it's really more about not experiencing things the way you're used to. And that depends ultimately on the body. I think like an insect, like a dragonfly, I think it's got 6 reflective surfaces on the sides, right? Is that scientific? Is that right? So whenever it flies around, it sees everything. It's like got 6 panels, 6 images. And that's the dragonfly's way of perceiving reality. But as a human, I've got 1 pair of eyes, and I look straight front of me. Everything is singular. So the question is, who is right and who is wrong? Like, would you be terrified if we're transforming to dragonfly? I would be, because I'm still experiencing these things, but I'm not interacting with the people, experience the way I like it anymore. Go on.
I see your point. Like, I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, I guess experience can manifest depending on the body that's doing the experiencing. But then again, like if it's the body that's doing the experiencing, then once the body is gone, then presumably your consciousness is gone. Isn't it as simple as that? Like you're gone.
Well, that's the $1 million question. So, the Buddha says no, but not in the way that the Hindus say no. Right? There's a soul, according to the Hindu or Christian tradition, or a lot of folk religions. There is a soul, Atman, something is inside of you. Using Bhagavad Gita as a reference, it's like putting off old clothes, and you're reborn, you're putting on new clothes. The selfhood, right? So when you die, you don't die. You're continue to experience it. That's according to the Bhagavad Gita. But in Buddhism, it's more like it's a stream of consciousness. It's a condition that's been propelled along. Like my memory, my habit, it forces me to go a certain way, and they are somehow recon together. These different forces, they call the 5 aggregates. They will retake a shape. And then you ask, is that you? Like if I can't remember my past life, why am I suffering his consequences? And how do you define that as two? And Buddha was asked that question, and the metaphor he used is the candle, I think. So you light one candle, there's a flame sitting on the candle. You use the candle to light the same flame to light another candle. The second candle now is lit. And then the Buddha asked the question, tell me, are they the same flame? Are they different? Right? And also there's one of my favorite sutras, it's called a Salistamba Sutra. And it really addresses the question way more eloquently than I ever can. It's considered possibly the oldest Mahayana Sutra. It's still very Theravada in flavor, right? It talks about the 5 aggregates a lot, for example. And that sutra uses very, very hard language to answer this question. He says, no, nothing gets reincarnated. There's nothing, and nothing. Just nothing. And then you go into Prajna Paramita, the section of Mahayana, is almost very nihilistic. It is. It tells you there's nothing. You only get this one lifetime. That person is you. He's created because of you. But that person, there's nothing that gets transmigrated from one lifetime to another. And it goes even to say, if you follow the logic to a very extreme degree, how do you know you're the same you from 1 second ago? What defines that you? You're living right now. You're changing. Your emotion state completely changes. And next, or appearance changes, right? I had a lot of hair. Now I'm going bald, for example. And you change. You got to face aging. You got to face unforeseen circumstances. You entirely change. So how to define that you is still you? That's the second way to look at it. So, yeah, it's a pretty hard question to be given a yes or no sort of answer on it.
Let's have one
Yes.
question.
Hi. I watched this Dowd video a long time ago. It was like something with a stream, like a stream analogy, and it was just talking about like sometimes the stream it's taking you in a certain direction, and if you kind of swim against the current and try to change your direction, like you could become fatigued and drown. So my question is, sometimes in life, like personally, I feel like there's been challenges where, I feel like the stream has been taking me down one route, and I fought against that and kind of changed my direction down this stream. So I wanted to know, like, when should you fight against the stream, and when should you just let the stream like take you?
Right. Wow, that's a really, really good question. I can only speak from my personal experience practicing what I practice, right? Taoism and Buddhism. And remember the story I was telling about cutting up the ox. I omitted a lot of parts, but it's got a part that says this: I discovered the natural way, the flow of the Tao, where my life is bringing me. It was almost like a metaphor. Then I carefully go along with it, and the meat falls off. But I avoid the bones and tendon that would dull my blade. And in other cases, it's so hard to discern where the obstacle is. I really got to slow down and assess the situation, right? So there is a sense of a tremendous amount of grace in just accepting the flow of life, not to fight against it. But at the same time, Taoism also advocates do go along with it. Right? I think the guiding principle for me personally has to go back to the moral precepts. For example, am I being kind? Am I being frugal? Like, am I doing this thing in order to increase my indulgence? Or am I putting my welfare ahead of other people? And so long as I'm fulfilling these criteria, as a Buddhist, the five precepts, I'm being loving, I'm being cultivating compassion, and that side is done. Don't think a person can go too wrong in either direction. And when the fight is required of a person, it's also to think about who is doing the fight. And this is according to both Taoism and Buddhism. Like, who is the person doing it? What is he trying to achieve? And it's almost like the story of in a book called Unfettered Mind. It's a samurai in a Japanese samurai book. Mm-hmm. And it says, don't kill, don't draw your sword. That's the best way. Just always be as submissive as possible, to go along with the humility, go along with life. But when it's called upon you to face an obstacle, do kill. But when you kill with no mind, or rather you can say kill with compassion. It's nothing personal. Or it's really easy to say something like this and hard to do it. So the idea is the metaphor you gave is the water. It says is actually the original quote comes from, I think, the second chapter of Tao Te Ching. It says the greatest virtue, and virtue in the Chinese also means power. It's not just virtue; it's got magical power. If a virtuous person, somehow things will bend to your will spontaneously. The ancient Chinese thought. It says the greatest virtue, the power you can have, is to behave like a Tao, which is to behave like water. And how does it behave? It says it goes to places, dirty places, lowly places, where other people don't want to go. It is the softest thing in the world, but it persists so much that gradually it wears away even stone and rocks. So that's the power of following the Tao. It's almost like an active passivity. Like in karate, when I practice, my coaches tell me your body retreats, but your spirit forwards. Sometimes it does seem like I'm going along with the life, just throwing my hands up. But I think the will is intact. I don't know how much I answered that.
No, it gave me clarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, maybe some
I-
short
another question?
questions?
Sure.
Okay, short questions.
Can I add to that? Like, my experience with, life pushing towards your direction and fighting back has to do with surrender. Like there's this idea like you can, that you have like free will, you can control like your fate or destiny. I think that's false. And when you like really understand that, I don't know, I've only had this experience once in my life and it was very temporary, but when I really understood that, I felt very liberated and free from trying to control like this life or this world, this thing. Like earlier you were saying how when you're in Istanbul, you're just walking and then you realize like for a moment that like it sounded like to me like you weren't really in control of anything, like things were just happening to you. And when you realize like things are just happening and you're just part of that process, sometimes like you can get an epiphany and then like you realize you can't actually control anything, and then you unlock some, or I at least I unlocked some ability to stay really present, and when you're really present, you just become more competent. So any problem that you're tackling, you're able to put your full attention into it, your full intelligence, and you're just more likely to get success with it because you're no longer hampered by fear or greed or any of these things that can dull your intelligence and your awareness. That's just my experience with like when stuff like that happens. You have to surrender. I just don't know exactly how you can like replicate that process. I think it just kind of happens.
Yeah, it's spontaneous action. I'm very enviable of your realization, by the way. I do think it's resonates a lot what I'm trying to convey here, right? To be one with the Tao. It's actually called Wu Wei, non-action, spontaneous action. I try to avoid that topic specifically. But I've got one thing to say about this. Believing free will or not, when you cross the road, you still got to look left and right.
Yeah. Well put, well put. Thank you, Adam, very much. You gave us a deep dive into Taoism today, and I think for everyone it was slightly different, but for me it was a profound experience, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.